Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bishara is joining us now in the studio. One of the fundamental elements of the case that the Israeli representatives were putting forward this morning was the degree to which that Israel was apparently supplying humanitarian aid into Gaza. One of them described it as a flood.
Yes. It's in a kind of a theater of the absurd, this would be very funny. I mean, it's actually comical, but then it's tragic. If I had the chance to capture that moment and frame it, I would put it in my office for eternity. This is what media is made for, in order to capture those moments, expose them for what they are, the lies of power, right? And that's why power needs to be questioned all the time. You had these two kind of, grim characters appearing in the International Court of Justice, making a defenseless defense, indefensible, of Israel, and making such claims that everybody in the world knows to be false. Everybody in the world. Why do I say everybody in the world? Because even Israel's allies think it's false. Otherwise, why would the Americans build a floating port off the Gaza coast if Israel is flooding Gaza with aid? Why would the wife of former Senator McCain, a Republican senator, a great friend of Israel, she is a great friend of Israel, but she's now the director or the head of the World Food Program. Why would she talk about famine in Gaza? Right? Why would the Europeans talk about famine in Gaza? I'm talking about Israel's friends in Europe, Germany, France, and so on and so forth. So basically, everyone knows. We just heard from the UN in your own report earlier that Israel is closing in on Gaza. Israel is blocking aid from reaching Gaza. The Americans have pleaded with the Netanyahu government to allow aid to Gaza. So despite all the testimony, despite all the images, despite all the reporting, all the facts, all the UN documents, and still you would have an Israeli bureaucrat, right, come out and say, we are flooding Gaza with aid.
And it's worth mentioning that when she came to the end of her presentation, there was a woman in the gallery who shouted out, "Liar," at which point the feed was cut. So even in the ICJ itself, there were members of the public who were not being convinced by what was being said. But these things are very often fairly dry, fairly, as you say, bureaucratic in their approach. We've seen a different approach from Israel at the United Nations. Talk to us through what you see as the different ways that Israel is representing itself in the International Court of Justice compared to the United Nations.
So this is the thing, right? I mean, if I could use any kind of analogy or metaphor, it would be, that was the circus, right, at the United Nations, with the Israeli ambassador doing his acrobatics. Rude, obnoxious, chutzpah-like acrobatics. And at the ICJ, it was more of the theater of the absurd. Just lie after lie after lie after lie. Just, series of lies that easily debunked, easily contradicted, easily argued against, and so on. Not convincing at all. It is interesting, though, that the Israeli ambassador at the United Nations is cocky. The Israeli delegation at the ICJ is coy. Cocky versus coy. Why? Why are they coy here and cocky there? I think because the ICJ matters. Not because the ICJ is going to liberate Palestine or end the war in Gaza or force a ceasefire on Israel, because you can do whatever you might do at the United Nations, and basically at the end of the day, there's America and it can block any action. At the ICJ, it's about the moral and the legal standing. And if the ICJ does take the position that there needs to be provisional steps against Israel, that Israel is plausibly, again, carrying genocide, Israel cannot withstand that. But the same quickly, that's why the ICC is also important. Because once you start calling those generals and Netanyahu criminals, will not go away.
Marwan Bishara, thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.